Hello and welcome. We have a very important and interesting show for you. Very tough topic for me and for, I think, most of you as you listen, but one we can really learn from and become more aware of. We're going to be talking about incest and sexual abuse. One of my most interesting interviews from the past was with a woman named Mary Havens, who was on my show back in 1994 talking about this topic. And she recently contacted me and said she has a book out and wondered if I would like to meet and do another interview. And I said yes, and so she's my guest tonight. And with me is her wonderful book that I'm going to hold up right away before I even introduce Mary. The book is called, and I'll let my cameraman zoom in, The Shadows in My Heart. Such an apropos title, Mary. And the scene is a farm scene. Mary grew up on a farm in southwestern Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And as I was telling her, the book really gives us a picture of life back when you grew up, farm life, life in a big family, 12 children in your family, and then the tough story of your marriage and relationship with your husband. So welcome back, Mary. I'm
Thank
going
you.
on here.
Thank you.
It's good to see you. The book is a hard read in one sense, in that so many hard things happened to your family. But in another way, I couldn't put it down. It's so well written, such an important thing, I think, to bring more light to, come out of the shadows, so to speak. I'm wondering why you decided to write it, though, because, as you said to me, it kind of forced you to relive a lot of tough things. But what was your motivation?
It was after my mom died, or during the process of her dying, that I realized how dramatic my life had been and how she had been involved in so much of it. And she did a deathbed confession to me, which helped to inspire me to go ahead and write the book. And during that time, I actually had a conversation with her, which is a little different than what's actually in the book, where she called me to her bedside. And I sort of went part way with her as she was dying. And she had requested or told me that she wanted me to go ahead and live my life and do what I had always intended to do. And I didn't know that really writing a book is what I wanted to do, but I had heard that year after year after year. And because of the trauma that went on during her death, I wanted to really vindicate her, if that makes any sense, because part of what happened to me was a result of things that she did that didn't protect me. But I didn't feel like my mom was a bad mother. She had lost 4 children. I can't know what that's like. I know that her heart was broken. And one of the things she had said to me is, I don't know what to choose. I want to stay with all of you, but I want to go with them, which was my siblings. And so it was a hard decision to really come down to it finally, because she died in 2003, and I didn't really seriously start writing until 2012.
Oh, wow, so you sat on that for a while.
I did. I did. It was 5 years after I had tape recorded our conversation that I came across the tape, and I listened to it and cried for weeks, hearing what she had to say and knowing what she had gone through. My kids also had been sexually abused. My 2 daughters had been sexually abused by their dad, and we had been in a family incest treatment program, and then they had children, and at the time they did not want their children to know what their father had done to them. And so I was sworn to secrecy, which I never wanted to do. I felt it was really important not to ever tell details, but that the kids know why we might say some of the things we did about being alone with him or whatnot. But they did not, under any circumstances, want their kids to know that their grandpa was a child molester.
Can I stop you? I want to go back and just have you talk a little bit about what you hope people can get from the book? Because that's, I think, a really interesting thing for people to hear.
Well, I think it's really important that people will understand that keeping this secret doesn't help them. It does more harm than it'll ever do good. And
yet, it's such a taboo thing in our society yet that it's understandable, isn't it, why people want to keep secrets?
It is. It's embarrassing. I had been sexually molested, but that was nothing compared to the sexual abuse I lived with this man and the things that he did and the manipulation and all those things. And I did not know how to get out. And my mother dying is not a good reason to get out, but it was the secret. And the secret's so damaging. And so many people had seen us on Oprah, so it wasn't like it was really a secret.
I should tell the viewers, Mary and her husband at the time, Stan, and one of her daughters, both daughters, were on Oprah, and you were actually on 3 separate times in '92 and '95, and you've also been a person involved with Dr. Phil's show, and you said you were tweeting.
Tweeting, yes, we did live stream tweeting for him.
Live stream, okay. Yes. So you've had a lot of public attention in a sense, or you've brought your topic to a big part of the population.
I actually was on Twin Cities Live with Bob Bruce when in my father's house, and I can't remember the author of that book, but we were in disguise. There was a panel of us in disguise, and that was about her being abused. And she's from Canada. I just can't remember her name right now.
So several media things.
Yes.
Do you feel that from the response you're getting that people are talking more in families? What are some of the things that you think are coming out of your being more public?
I think one of the most amazing things is that since I have told my story, and I'm an ordinary woman, not like the Hollywood types, not like the government people who are now being exposed, that people feel more comfortable. And when I tell my story, I hear their story. And oftentimes it's the very first time they've ever told anyone. And I'm not talking young people, I'm talking people my age, probably between 50 and on up.
And it doesn't always have to be sexual intercourse that means it's abuse, that means it's sexual abuse, does it?
Yes.
Any kind of touch that is inappropriate, talking that's sexually inappropriate with.
One of the things that I have done recently was become involved in Priceless Alaska, which is addressing sex trafficking. And I had no idea of what is going on with sex trafficking and how children are groomed. So in the case of my girls, they were being groomed and trained to be sex trafficked. Fortunately, we had interception when I uncovered all of that, and we went into a family incest treatment program. But you think about how they're being recruited, even in elementary school, and the whole thing, if you're being sexually abused at home, how do you know?
Right.
Especially when you're a small child like my girls were. And I asked my daughter the other day, I said, how old were you when you realized that what was happening to you was wrong? And she said probably 8 or 9.
And the abuse, let's fill the viewers in. You and Stan were married, and you had first daughter Shannon, and then 4 years later, Chantel.
Yes, and had a son in
Shane.
between, yes.
That's right. Shane was in the middle, wasn't he? But Shane was not abused, am I right?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I think just being in our family and the dynamics of incest, I constitute that as being sexually abused.
Well, that's a good point, Mary. I bet therapists would agree with you. He was living in a dysfunctional family, wasn't he? And how old? Shannon was 3 when you know she was first abused?
Well, Shannon was Yes, 3. She says that that's when she remembers, and so does Chantel, that they were 3 when they had their first memory of it.
Okay.
After writing the book and looking back, I believe Shannon had been molested by her father when she was just weeks old.
Oh, do you?
Yes.
I'm sure writing the book gave you some insights that you maybe stuffed or didn't have the energy to focus on as a young mom, were overwhelmed by.
Well, one of the things that a pedophile does is create chaos, and he even states that on the Oprah show. So anything in the book that you read is dialogue directly from the show. I transcribed it, and it's in the book that way. And so he created chaos and moving. You'll notice we move all the time. It's sort of a habit I haven't gotten out of lately, but moving because he didn't want to get uncovered. And so he did all kinds of things to cause distractions. And I always believed that he had sexually abused Shannon because my younger sister Sharon came and told us, and she was 5 at the time. And I believed her. I took her to the doctor.
She told you that she had been abused by your husband, too.
Yes. And she told me in front of his parents.
That's right.
Yes.
I was surprised when I read that in the book, but I'm not, as I read the whole book. So your sense of what was going on, when did you start having an uncomfortable or a gut level kind of sense that something might be going on that was...
I don't think I was ever comfortable with him. His little brother drowned, and so that was kind of the way we connected because I had lost siblings. And he was not a stable person, but I didn't know what that was either because our family was always turned upside down with the deaths. I mean, I was 3 at the first death and 8 at the second death, and I think it was 18 at the third and 21 at the fourth. So all these years, and then other kids dying in between. So our family was always very chaotic.
Yeah, a lot of loss, a lot of maybe grieving that was not shared in a way that...
I don't even think we knew how to grieve.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about
a lot of families
deaths.
don't, Mary, do they?
No. And even like with my mother, she covered up for him too. And so...
For your husband, didn't she?
Yes.
And that's an important part of the book, I think, the connection that... It was almost a triad, wasn't it? Your mother and you and Stan, and her mother would stand up for him, didn't she?
Yes.
Which must have broken your heart.
Yes.
But it also then made it harder for you to break away from him.
Yes.
And that all kind of comes out as one reads the book, but it was quite a dynamic. How many years were you married?
Well, all total, before I divorced him, it was 38 years.
38, okay.
Yes.
And there were times in the book when I was reading and I thought, oh, good, she's going to leave him now. You know, the straw has been broken, the camel's back. But you kept going back.
Yes.
And you kept going back, and your reasons were varied, weren't they, depending on the time?
Yeah, there was, some of it was brought on by religion and
Right.
my
You were
mother's,
Catholic.
really indoctrinating that. Some of it was, he was training and grooming the kids to get me back too. So they were saying things and wanting him to come back. But it wasn't until I started writing the book and realizing that that's what he was doing. He was manipulating them to get to me. And he still has that characteristic today, manipulation, power, and control over situations. And it's a part of that whole character that these people have. And it's mostly men who are pedophiles, although there are some women. And my mother, in the end, she admitted that she knew what I was telling her was true. She just couldn't make herself believe it. And I don't think that's an uncommon thing even in today's society, you don't want to believe that's happening. And it's embarrassing. Like for me, I struggle with that. It's still very embarrassing to me that I stayed. I couldn't figure out how to get out, but I don't think it's an uncommon thing.
No, it's not. And the reasons sometimes were practical. You financially felt you had to stay. You had hopes so often throughout the book. We'll finally be a family. Having another baby might make the difference. He'll straighten out. I mean, you kept hoping, didn't you?
I did to some degree, but after Chantal was born, I knew I had to financially become stable myself, because that was really bad until after she was born, and then I got a good job. But I think that it was difficult to just leave, because he had rights to have visitation with the kids.
So you couldn't get rid of him?
No.
Totally, could you? And even when he was then convicted and became a felon, correct? Would he still have rights after that?
He would have, but the kids were older then, so Chantal was 15 at the time, almost 16. So at that point, you know, it wouldn't have been much of a case. But then they felt like they forgave him. They felt like he had stopped, which he did stop abusing them. But I don't know who else the other victims are. I've been reading a book called Predators, Pedophiles, Rapists, and Other Sex Offenders. It's written by Anna Salter from Madison, and she interviewed the prisoners at Waupun State Prison. It's a wonderful book that describes clearly what he is and what they do and how they will avoid getting caught again. They're very, very good at it. I read also a book by an author here in the Twin Cities, or in Minnesota, and he said there's no greater con than a pedophile. And I think that is the greatest statement I've ever heard.
I have also heard that it's very hard to rehabilitate pedophiles. And I'm not positive that my source was correct, but I think it is true. Well, you're now divorced. Do you feel, Mary, now free of Stan and his influence, or are you still feeling under the cloud of your life with him? Because 38 years is not an easy...
I feel like I'm still under the cloud of him because my kids don't really support me. They've stood by him. And primarily because they don't want their kids to know what he is.
And he can be a charming man, can't he?
Well, I don't find him that way at all anymore, but he can be because people yes, yes,
find him interesting. Well, what would you say to other women who may be listening now? I'm sure there are many who are out there saying, I think I need to get out, you know. What do you say to them, Mary, in terms of...
I say get out, but before you get out, find a safe way out. Because it isn't always safe just to walk out, because they will stalk you, they will hunt you down, and you need to have protection. If you have children, you really need to have those kids protected. And there are so many places now that will help you, but it's still not going to be easy. And I mean, I know what it's like to be hunted down, and I lived in fear of being killed. And I think that's often the case, especially if there's a pedophile who doesn't want to be caught. Maybe they haven't been caught yet. Maybe you suspect it. Or maybe they're sexually abusing you. The pornography and all the perverted things that men will do to control you, to deflect from what they're actually doing to your children. The other thing is if your kids come to you and tell you something, believe them first and question. Make sure you question and resolve anything that may have been said. Sometimes it may be possible that you think someone has sexually abused your child when in fact they haven't. It isn't 100%.
In that kind of a case, if you suspect but you're not sure, do you still bring it up with the child?
I think you have to be careful of what you say. Don't lead them on. Ask them the questions. Ask them to tell you what they're talking about, because sometimes we want to have an explanation that the child doesn't even understand.
True.
But if they are saying things, then do question. Do make sure you understand what they are saying.
I heard a therapist once suggest that using a doll with a young child is a way to possibly get at the truth by asking the child, show me what, what this person did to the doll or did to you via the doll.
My girls were trained at a very young age. They didn't know that that was not normal. And so I think that if something happens and the child is older, they might be able to describe it better.
We're going to put at the end of the program some resource places that are plugged in the book, and I think that will be when you want to take notes at that point. So we can give you those in a few minutes. The girls now are in their late 40s and 50s. They have been close to you and then not so close, and it's gone back and forth, it sounds like, Mary.
The closer I came to writing the book and them believing that the book was coming out, the more separation that I've had.
And that's a big loss, isn't it?
It's a very big loss.
Yes. But they were okay with you doing the media things earlier in the 90s.
Yes.
But it's because their children now the girls are wanting to protect their kids from the truth.
Yes.
Okay.
And we had the support of Wilder when we were in the media and all of that stuff. And I think they just wanted it to go away. I think they're probably mad at me because I didn't want to let it go away because I want it stopped.
That makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Yes, and so outing the secret and continuing to talk about it for them maybe they don't understand the positive benefits.
They've both said to me that it's embarrassing and they feel guilty and ashamed for something that he did to them. And it is, I understand that, and I see that in different programs and things that I am in groups on Facebook, and there's an organization called NASCA, which is National Association of Adult Survivors of Abuse, Child Abuse, and that has really opened my eyes too to the things that everyone says. It's embarrassing. And the embarrassing part is what actually happened to them and the guilt you feel and the shame you feel for something that you didn't do.
Well, yes, and the fact that children and young people often think it's their fault somehow, which just makes me feel so sad that is an outcome of it, but it's common, isn't it?
It is very common. It's probably less common for someone like me who feels embarrassed and ashamed and guilty because I couldn't get out. And I had all this information, but I still didn't know how to get out. And by the end, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was likely to do something that would have been horrible. And what I did was I left. And I felt so guilty leaving everybody behind because I felt like I had abandoned them, although they were adults and the kids weren't small children anymore. But it was still was very hard for me to leave because I wanted him to leave and he wouldn't. And I believe he thought I was coming back even up till probably a year ago.
Wow. So it's very hard for people to understand who have not been in your shoes, isn't it? I want to give now some resource information. So if you would get out your pen and paper if you want to take notes. There is an organization called the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence Hotline, and that phone number is 800-799 7233, or you can go to www.ncadv.org. And then there is another organization that is called Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, and the website for that is rainn.org. And then I also want to plug Mary's website, because via that you can access ways in terms of how to get her book and learn more about what she's up to. And that is easy to remember. It's maryhavens.com. And Havens, Havens. So we're out of time already, Mary. I would love to have more time. This has gone way too fast, but thank you so much for coming back and
You're welcome.
telling us what's happened in the last many years. And I'm so glad you are out.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you. Can I just say I want to give credit to Lynn Wiese Sneyd,
Yes.
who is my ghostwriter. Without her, the book would not have been written.
Thank you. I meant to share her name too, Lynn Wiese Sneyd. And yes, she deserves credit too.
Yes. Yes.
Well, thank you, and best of luck to you as
Thank you.
continue your growing and reaching out to share your hard story, but one that has hope and will help many, I'm sure.
Yes. I'd like the way you say hard story, because I've been trying to figure out, or people say to me, I enjoyed your book, and I always say, I don't know about you enjoyed
It's
it.
the word enjoy.
Yes.
Enjoyment isn't quite right, is
Yes.
it? But it's
Yes.
hard, but it's
Yes.
important.
It's hard to read.
Hard to read.
Yes, yes.
Well, thank you, Mary. And thank you
welcome.
for being with us. I'll be back again next week. Until then, have a good week.